Hello, everybody. Today we are going to talk about cardiorespiratory fitness assessment and training methods through the NCSF Personal Training Guide. Learning goals are recognize the various methods by which to assess cardiovascular fitness, understand how to gauge cardiovascular training intensity using heart rates, know how to calculate a client's max heart rate and heart rate training zone using the heart rate reserve method, understand how to use the rate of perceived exertion scale, and understand the different types of cardiovascular training, steady state versus interval. So cardiovascular fitness increases lifespan and quality of life. It is dictated by your VO2 max, which is a prediction of how many milliliters of oxygen are running through your blood at any given time. And we can assess your VO2 max using many different step tests and run tests, as well as bike tests. Test selection is based on goals, needs, and limitations. So you might just be in general cardiorespiratory fitness, and you might be a deconditioned individual who has the goal of just becoming a conditioned athlete or a conditioned individual. Some of the needs may be a little bit higher for athletes or individuals who are in their mid-20s and have been working out for a long time. They might have higher needs, and there are definitely limitations for individuals who are a little bit older and obese, as well as individuals with disabilities. So submax tests versus graded exercise tests, we'll talk about that. Heart rates determine training intensities and capacity, and heart rate training zone, or HRTZ. When it comes to submax tests and graded exercise tests, the CRF test selection should be based on the client's proficiency, goals, experience, and specific needs, as well as the exercise professional knowledge and testing experience. The submaximal tests are far more common than graded exercise tests in personal training settings due to ease, safety, and the required equipment. Submaximal test protocols do not reach the maximal capacity of the client. Maximal predictions are made using physiological response to the submaximal workload based on heart rate response. So we're not training the individual at maximal capacity when we are testing them. We want them at submax. And graded exercise test allows for more direct measurement, allows for direct measurement of cardiorespiratory fitness via periodic increases in intensity to achieve a maximal or submaximal workload. Cardiorespiratory fitness tests. We have step tests, walk, jog tests, run tests, and bike tests. Step tests are easy to implement. Walk, jog tests are also easy to implement, and so are run tests. And as far as validity, they kind of over-predict for fit individuals. Step tests, metronome, pace tests are considered superior than non-pace protocols. So the more that you keep track of the pace and the rhythm of the individual during a step test, the better. It's going to be unsuitable for moderate to high level obese or very deconditioned clients. So step tests might not be appropriate for everyone. Walk and jog tests the same, might not be great for deconditioned clients, but walking might be better than doing repetitive steps. Easy to implement with limited equipment, viable for deconditioned or new exercises with no experience. So definitely a little bit better if you're deconditioned or obese. And validity is affected by motivation, exercise tolerance, and distance accuracy. So the individual might not be motivated. You might have to motivate them to actually complete the test, and that can change the validity of the assessment. And it can over-predict fit individuals, okay? So it can make it seem like you might be more fit than you actually are, and that's just a limitation of test protocols. But they get better as you define the criteria more specifically and use equipment. Run tests, they're easy to implement using limited equipment, viable for fit or conditioned individuals only. So run tests should be performed for fit individuals who can sustain long periods of time with a high heart rate. Validity affected by test experience due to pace, client motivation, running economy, and distance accuracy. So making sure that the individual isn't over exerting their energy in the beginning, and making sure that they're understanding that they have to pace They also have to be motivated to perform the test. So maybe they have a goal, and then economy, making sure they're not burning out in the beginning or burning out at the end. And distant accuracy, so making sure that you're not over pushing yourself in the beginning, again, kind of like economy, but if you kind of misinterpret the distance, or if you think it's going to be a little bit longer than you think, then you might not give it your all. Bike tests, relatively difficult to implement because equipment and technical experience are required. Might be a little bit more expensive, viable for multiple populations, because individuals might have better mobility on a bike than standing, but a moderate level of fitness is required. Validity is high with strict protocol adherence, and leg strength is highly relevant factor. Maximal heart rate, NCSF determines it using a 220 minus your age, which is not a limiting factor to fitness. Example, a 20-year-old male, a 220 minus 20 years would be 200 beats per minute, and that would be the predicted max heart rate. And that is the formula that gives a pretty good accuracy, 68%. As far as maximal heart rate, there is the heart rate max method, and there is multi-factor general population formula for max heart rate. So not everyone should use a 220 minus their age. If the individual smokes, they'll go over these calculations here. So if the individual smokes, there'll be max heart rate will be, you'll minus your max heart rate times 0.812 times your age plus 0.276 times your resting heart rate minus 0.08 times how much you weigh minus 4.5 times a smoking code. So there would be a smoking code, and which would be 1 for smokers and 0 for non-smokers. And that would be a different way you could use heart rate to find for individuals that smoke. And then also obese individuals, max heart rate minus 0.5 times age for obese individuals. And older adults, you could do max heart rate minus 0.7 times your age. Heart rate max method is 220 minus your age, which would be your max heart rate, times your training intensity. What percent? Assumes all people the same age should train in the same range. We'll talk more about the heart rate max method in a little bit. The heart rate reserve. So your heart rate reserve method is equal to your max heart rate minus your resting heart rate. So your training heart rate equals your heart rate reserve times training intensity expressed as percentage plus your resting heart rate. So your resting heart rate, when you wake up, you have a resting heart rate. It could be 60, it could be 70, it could be 80. And what you're going to do, for example, a 20-year-old male, max heart rate is 200 beats per minute, and the resting heart rate is great, 60 beats per minute. So 200 beats per minute minus 60 beats equals 140 beats per minute. And then you multiply that by 0.60, which would be 60%. And that would be 144 beats per minute. And then you'd also multiply 140 beats per minute times 0.80 or 80%. Those 60 beats equals 172 beats per minute. So the training zone for the individual who is 20 would be 144 to 172 beats per minute if their resting heart rate is at 60 beats per minute. So heart rate reserve method allows you to find a training zone, and it will help you basically teach yourself what training zones to be in, because you don't want to be over 80% if you're going to be training cardiovascular fitness, and you don't want to be under 60%. So you can train using the heart rate reserve method to increase your cardiorespiratory fitness. As far as cardiovascular training guidelines, recommend training intensities. So training intensities range for deconditioned individuals. You only want to train at 40 to 60% of VO2 max. And first you find out the VO2 max, and then you multiply 40 to 60% of that, and that would be your range. It'd also be your 50 to 60% of your heart rate reserve, or it is 60 to 70% of your heart rate max. Training intensities ranges for healthy individuals, 60 to 80% of heart rate reserve of VO2 max, and 75 to 90% of heart rate max. Rate of perceived exertion. It's important that you use the Borg or modified RPE scale. The rate of perceived exertion, basically teaching the client what it's like or what it feels like to them when they're working out, especially through the ventilation. Ventilation is really important. So at no exertion, very light, breathing is very light, normal breathing, 50 to 60%. That is your warm up, okay? When you are breathing a little bit deeper, but comfortable breathing, able to hold a conversation, you're at the modified level at about a 2 to 3 range, and you're at the Borg RPE scale at about a 10, 11, and 12 range, okay? That is recovery, 60 to 70%. Aerobic, aware that your breathing is harder, able to talk but difficult to hold a conversation. So this is where you become a little bit more uncomfortable. This is going to be your aerobic zone. That is going to be at a 4 level in your RPE scale, or about a 13 or 14 in your Borg scale. As far as starting to breathe and hard and getting uncomfortable, then you're in an anaerobic state. This is a 5 or a 6 on the modified RPE scale, or a 15 and a 16 on the Borg scale. You've probably gone a little bit over intensity, and you're probably going to have to come back to aerobic. So you might have gotten a little bit too high, and when we're going through VO2 max, you're going to have deep and forceful breathing, comfortable and not wanting to talk. You're going to be at a modified RPE scale at a 7 or 8, or a Borg scale at a 17 or 18. This is going to be 90 to 80% of max heart rate. Extremely hard is at 9, and maximal exertion is 10, and Borg scale of 20. So maximal heart rate, you're at 50 to 60% very light, 60 to 70% deeper but uncomfortable, but comfortable. 70 to 80% is difficult to talk, 80 to 90% getting uncomfortable and starting to breathe hard, and then 90 to 100% is deep and forceful breathing. So that would be your VO2 max. Talk tests. So ventilation rates can also indicate intensity. So if you're able to talk, then you are at the recovery stage, 60, 70% of max heart rate. It's a great stage to work in here. So used with RPE to assess intensity accuracy, and inability to hold conversation represents 70 to 80% of heart rate max, or 14 on the RPE scale. Steady state versus interval training. So steady state is a set pace where heart rate will not vary by less than or more than 5 beats per minute. Useful for baseline cardiorespiratory fitness among novice exercises or long distance endurance for experienced exercises. Interval training, variations in intensity, greater adaptation rate, and potential increase for EPOC, or excess post-oxygen consumption, okay? And that is basically your debt to oxygen ratio after you've worked out in high intensity states like interval training. So as you see here, low intensity, high intensity, low intensity, high intensity. When intensity transitions equal 30 seconds and percentage of heart rate max go up, you have an 80% intensity rate with the high intensity, and you have a 60% at the 5-minute steady state. So when the percent of heart rate max goes up, you're going to be more interval training, and then in a steady state, you're going to be more than 5 beats per minute at a set pace. As far as high intensity versus low intensity, higher intensities equals greater performance gains in caloric expenditure. Low moderate intensities equals health, disease prevention, lower risk for injury. Client goals, needs, limitations, interests dictate exercise intensity and type. So for general health, frequency most days, duration crew 30 minutes a day at least. For fitness levels, 30 to 90 minutes per day, 3 to 5 days a week. And for performance levels, you want to think 5 to 7 days a week for 45 to 90 minutes per day. So the fat burning zone myth, well, what was known as a fat burning zone basically means that you're going 3 miles per hour or walking 3 miles per hour. You're just walking at a normal pace. And that was perceived to be a fat burning zone. Basically, what the myth means is that you're not actually going to be burning the most fat, or you're not going to be really burning that much at all. And not saying that's a bad thing, but when you add the speed, and you're going to calculate more calories. And so an endurance zone would be 7 miles per hour at a set pace, and you'd burn a lot more calories in the end. So when it comes to burning fat, yes, it's important to uh, learn the 3 mile per hour zone, but you also want to be able to build up to 5 to 7 miles per hour so you can really sustain burning caloric density. So that's going to be it for the PowerPoint guide. As far as some of the notes from the book here, let's see if there's anything else I've missed. I guess we can go back over the steady state versus interval training. So steady state, the client performs at a set pace intensity so that they maintain a steady heart rate. So basically staying at the same pace. Let's just say your heart rate's at 120 beats per minute during the exercise, and it's not going to go up or down to 115 or 125. It's going to stay from 115 to 125, and this is going to help blood supply meet the demand of working cells and tissues. Can be performed for longer periods and is useful for developing baseline cardiorespiratory fitness and long distance training. Interval training, this is when you're going to see a 20% increase in adaptation rate, and it's going to be more effective for inducing greater cardiorespiratory adaptations. Takes advantage of variations in heart rate and resistance speed, so going up and down may be more useful with personal training due to greater adaptations in caloric expenditure in a shorter period of time. So using maybe like a up and down scheme where you're going high intensity to moderate intensity to low intensity and then back up. As far as high intensity versus low intensity training, we talked about higher intensities equals greater performance gains in caloric expenditure, and lower moderate intensities equals heart disease prevention and lower risk for injury. So both are very good for the individual. All right. And other than that, cardiorespiratory fitness greatly influences lifespan and quality of life. Aerobic exercise develops cardiorespiratory fitness via adaptations that promote the efficiency of the heart, lungs, and vascular system. And that's going to do it for a cardiovascular fitness assessment and training method.